Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 3 of What If Naruto was teleported in Final Fantasy X. If you guys enjoy this what if, then comment, like and subscribe. Let's go. Also, the video goal is 10 likes, so let me know that you're interested in the series and you want the next part. Then go ahead and check out the other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave. Also share the video with your friends and link in the description. So let's go. Luca Port. So, you ready? Standing on the deck, Naruto asked with a smile, receiving a nod from the Ronso in front of him. Okay, let's go. Don't hold back. Closing the distance in seconds, Kimari let loose a barrage of swift attacks with his spear, thrusts, horizontal swings at the torso, downward strokes to the head, diagonal slash across the chest, never slowing down for a second during his attempt to take the human male down. For someone his size, he was very fast. His footsteps were as light as feathers, constantly moving, shifting as he continued his offensive moves, trying to land an attack on the blonde. Naruto, meanwhile, decided to take the defensive ground, either swiftly moving his body around to dodge or using his kunai to parry Kimari's attacks. The Ronso might be very skilled and fast, but he was far behind many opponents Naruto had faced. He would never say it, but Naruto was actually seeing Kimari moving in slow motion, a feat he had never been able to do against his enemies in his world. The next was way stronger and faster than the previous one. Naruto stays still, Kimari said loudly and slammed the flat edge of his spear down, but Naruto took a step back and then put his foot on the weapon before jumping into the air, flipping and then landing behind Kimari with a cheeky grin. Not by a long shot. But then he was forced to crouch down low to dodge Kimari's spear when he removed it from the wooden deck and swung it around. Almost got me there, almost. Naruto smirked and proceeded to begin his own attack. Kimari suddenly found himself on the defensive as the young shinobi came at him with blinding fast attacks, which he tried his best to block. Since you can't keep up with my speed, try to read my body and predict where I am going to hit you next, Naruto advised. For the next 2 hours, Naruto continued to train with Kimari, giving him the best advice he had while the ship was sailing its way to Port City Luca. The blonde had never been a teacher of a genin team, but he had taught Konohamaru and his friends multiple times in the past, so he knew the very basic of teaching, and Naruto also did his best to make it as easy as possible for Kimari to learn something from their spar. Unlike those kids, mainly the grandson of Sarutobi Hiruzen, Kimari wasn't stubborn or hot-headed. He was a warrior, so he learnt rather quickly, and improved decently with each advice Naruto gave him. Kimari also gave him praises for his strength, knowledge and techniques, which made Naruto blush in embarrassment before explaining that it was actually what he had been able to learn from amazing teachers, as well as from experiences. Oi, where do you think you are kicking this thing? Naruto shouted in annoyance when the blitz ball hit him in the back of his head, nearly making him lose his balance. Grabbing the ball, Naruto threw it back to Titus, who was clearly the one who had kicked the balls too hard while training with the other members of Besaid Aurochs. Sorry Naruto. Yeah. Titus tried to catch the ball, which he was able to do, but immediately got knocked back and fell onto his back. Holy shit. The blitzball player gasped in surprise and awe as he tried to pick himself up. Where does that strength even come from anyway? He asked while having Waka helped him getting back to his feet. That is a million-gil question, yeah. Waka chuckled as he patted the young man on his back. Hold back a little, will you? Waka told Naruto, who nearly waved his hand around and turned back to Kimari. However, before he could resume training the Ronso, Yuna appeared and made her way toward them, carrying 2 bottles of water and a pair of cold towel. These are for you too. She said them with a beautiful smile. Thanks, but you don't have to do this, you know. Naruto grinned as he received a bottle from Yuna. You two are my guardians. Yuna shook her head and gave Kimari a towel to wipe the sweats on his face as Naruto drank the water, which turned out to be energy drink. This is the least I can do. Phew, that was refreshing. Naruto commented as he looked at the bottle and wiped his chin with the sleeve of his shirt. Thanks again, Yuna. He told her with his trademark grin. You're very welcome. The summoner smiled as she took the empty bottle from Naruto and gave him his towel. He wasn't sweating as much as Kimari, but they were practicing right under the sun with nothing above their head, so the heat had actually gotten to Naruto. So, how is your training? Yuna then decided to ask as she looked at the two. Kimari is improving. Under my guidance, he will be as strong as I am in no time. Naruto answered with confidence and proudly slapped his chest. Naruto gives Kimari too much credit. Kimari will never be able to become as strong as Naruto is. The Ronso humbly said as he gestured his hand toward the young man. Nah, have confidence in yourself, man. Believe in your strength, and in yourself. You won't be able to become strong with that attitude. Naruto pointed his thumb at his chest and declared loudly, plus, when someone has something important they want to protect, that's when they can become really strong. Both Kimari and Yuna looked at him in astonishment, as they did not expect something like that from him. You have someone you want to protect, right? They will be the reason for you to become strong. Naruto finished and put both hands behind his head, remembering Haku as Kimari looked at Yuna before nodding his head firmly. Wise words, Naruto, wise words. The Ronso commented, making the blonde grin. Yuna looked at Naruto and couldn't stop herself from smiling. Sure, he was strong, stronger than her, stronger than any of them and even stronger than her Eon, but his powers and immense strength didn't make who he is. Spyro wasn't his world, yet he chose to stay to help Yuna and her guardians protect it from sin. He had so many friends at home, who were all waiting for him to return, and sometimes, she heard Naruto telling Waka and Lulu how homesick he was, yet he still remained at Spyro. He became her guardian and traveled with Yuna on her pilgrimage, on a dangerous mission, simply because he wanted to help her, help them, the people of Spyro, who he didn't even know. That alone spoke volume of the man Naruto was. He might have been trained to become a mercenary, a killer for a price, but Yuna finally realized that it was his life, his choices, his faiths and beliefs that made him a hero. Naruto, Yuna said in a low tone before lowering her head, with her hands folding on her laps, thank you. For what? The blonde asked with a curious smile while scratching the back of his head. Thank you, for being here with us and for becoming my guardian. Yuna answered as she raised herself up and smiled at him. Naruto looked at the beautiful summoner for a moment before his smile spread out and became a grin. Waving his hand around, he said, nah, don't mention it. I'm happy to help, that's all. Yuna stared at him, before she broke into a fit of giggle. Hey, what's so funny? Nothing, Naruto, nothing. Yuna shook her head. She stopped giggling but the smile didn't leave her face. So, I don't want to bother you but, can you train me too? Naruto widened his eyes in surprise, while Kimari only looked at Yuna in curiosity. I want to become strong too. Of course, you don't have to if. It's alright. I'd love to. Naruto shook his head with a smile. With a nervous chuckle, he continued, but, Yuna, I'm not sure if I can train you to use your magic better. Course you don't, unless you start practicing white magic too. I'm sure when it comes to teaching white magic it will be the other way around between us. Yuna teased playfully, I want you to train me to better protect myself. Kimari taught me a few things when I was young. She quickly added before Kimari could speak up, knowing full well what her oldest guardian wanted to say, I can't always rely on the strength of my guardians, you know. Anything can happen during our journey, there can be times where I'm going to be separated from you guys. So it's best I learn how to protect myself, just in case that happens. You have your Eon. Naruto suggested while pointing his finger up. What if I am low on energy? It takes a lot to summon an Eon. Then you have me. I will always keep an eye out for you. Regardless of where you are, I will be there before you know it. Naruto pointed out with a grin, which actually made Yuna blush a bit. Wah. But of course, if you really want to learn, I have a couple of tricks I can teach you. He looked at Kimari and continued to assure the Ronso, of course, it won't be anything serious or too extreme, just enough to buy you some time until I get there. Great. The summoner smiled brightly. So where are we going to start? I can wait. How about we start right now? Naruto declared and created a clone, much to the surprise of the ship crew. Oh, I nearly forgot you can do that. Yuna stated while shaking her head. Kimari, why don't you continue with my clone? I will see what I can do with Yuna here. The Ronso nodded his head in understanding. The group split up, with Naruto walking to the other side of the deck with Yuna and his clone staying behind to resume Kimari's training. Line break. I don't feel so good. Naruto groaned as he wiped the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand while leaning his arms against the railing, desperately trying to hold on as the boat was shaken left and right by the strong waves. Yuna and Kamari had gone back to their respective rooms after their trainings with Naruto were over, leaving Naruto to stay on the deck because he wanted to have his own training, practicing the ninjutsu Tsunade had prepared for him in his backpack. It shouldn't be too hard of a problem with his clones, but when the strong waves started hitting the boat while the clones were training hard, they began to feel a bit seasick, and then when they started disappearing, Naruto started feeling extremely unwell. So you can run at extreme speed, punch harder than a Ronso, control elements at will, yet you can't handle a little seasick. Naruto turned his head and saw Lulu standing next to him with her arms crossing under her ample breasts. Her face was as calm as usual, but he could see the amusement in her eyes as she looked at him. Little. Try feeling it when it's 10 times worse than usual, Naruto said while trying to stand up, causing Lulu to feel a bit curious by that. The young ninja from another world then saw a small bottle with yellowish liquid in Lulu's hand and couldn't help but ask, "What's that?" "Drink this. It will make you feel better." She shook the bottle in front of his face while saying, "Ah, so you do care about me after all." Naruto smirked, making Lulu huff and turn her head away as he grabbed the bottle and quickly choked down the liquid inside. It tasted good, and it made him feel a lot better. "What is this thing anyway?" Naruto asked in surprise while looking at the empty bottle. "Ether. It restores energy or mana to the one who drinks it. Sometimes, it can be used as a type of medicine for simple sickness. I have no idea what will happen if you drink it, but..." Naruto snapped his head up to look at her. "Apparently, you feel better, right?" she asked with a small, amused smile. "Right. Next time, remind me to ask what you are giving me first." Naruto deadpanned and then turned back to stare at the sea, leaning forward and putting his arms on the ceiling. Lulu didn't say anything for a moment, and continued to stare at the young man in silence, which made him rather uncomfortable because he could feel her eyes on him. However, before Naruto could say anything to break the silence between them, it was Lulu who spoke first, as if she had been using this entire time to make up her mind. "It's amazing, about what you said earlier to Kamari and Yuna." Naruto looked at her in surprise. "You heard that? Where were you anyway?" "I was around," Lulu answered blankly. "Really? But I didn't see you. Guess I should have paid a bit more attention to my surrounding," Naruto said as he scratched the back of his head while Lulu could only shake her head and sighed. "So you really think that's amazing?" The voluptuous doll user nodded her head. "Thanks, I guess." He grinned. Lulu said as she stepped forward and came to stand next to him. "You see, Yuna has always wanted to help those around her, but she believes she lacks the strength to truly protect them from harm. Meanwhile, Kamari fiercely wants to keep Yuna safe, because that is the meaning of his life. Much like every other Ronso, he once desired to become the most powerful of his tribe, but was unable to because he was looked down upon and bullied by those who considered themselves superior than him." She closed her eyes for a moment and sighed longingly before continuing. "Hearing those words from someone as strong as you must have meant a lot to them." "I see." Naruto turned his body around and leaned his back against the deck railing with a smile. "Might I ask you one thing?" Lulu requested, with Naruto nodding his head in response. "Where did you learn such an amazing words from? Or is it something you realize on your own on your journey to become strong? Come on, seriously, you don't think I am capable of something like that?" Naruto asked with a small chuckle, but Lulu nodded her head nonetheless. "Ouch, you wound me." He joked playfully and laughed, making the black mage smile as well. "Well, you're right, I don't think I could have figured that out myself. I learned it from a very amazing person, back then when I first started my career as a ninja. It must have been hard for you. To tell you the truth, it's not." Lulu looked at him in surprise. "Me and my teammates, we had a very simple start. Cleaning houses, weeding gardens, taking care of our clients, even tasks as simple as finding missing pets, you get the idea." "Oh, I see." The woman nodded her head in understanding. "Then one day, I started complaining about those missions to the leader of village, because I don't think they can be classified as missions. I am pretty immature back then." He then paused when he saw the way she was looking at him. "Hold on, what is with that look?" "Nothing, please continue." Lulu shook her head with a small playful smile, almost unnoticeable. It was hard for her to imagine Naruto when he was younger, if he really considered himself mature now. Anyway, The old man, the leader of my village, gave me and my team a higher class mission. We were supposed to escort this bridge builder and protect him on his way from our village back to his home. Naruto explained before sighing, it was supposed to be a pretty normal mission, we only had to deal with wild animals and petty thieves, until assassins, hired mercenary ninjas started coming for him, because the bridge he's building was bad for an extremely rich bastard's business. Naruto growled at the thought of Gato, and Lulu could tell how bad of a man he had been. I was pretty scared back then, but my friends and teacher helped me through it. Naruto smiled. Anyway, there is this boy, Haku. At first we thought he was on our side, but turned out he was a partner of the leader, coming to save her partner when he was nearly defeated by my teacher. He then put his hand near his face and made a gesture. He wore a mask at the time, so when we met again, I didn't recognize him. I was tired from my training, so I fell asleep. He was there to wake me up. Looking back, who knows what he was planning to do to me while I was out. It's pretty scary when I think about it. The blonde chuckled while scratching his cheek. But you are still here, aren't you? Lulu asked, and Naruto nodded his head with a small smile. Then, is he? Yes, he is. We were enemies, and yet he taught me one of the most important lessons of my life. Naruto answered with a nod of his head. That man, Zabuza, meant a lot to him, because of what had happened to him and how the man had taken him in, even going so far as considered himself a tool for Zabuza to use as he wished, which is exactly what he wanted. It was amazing and sad at the same time. Naruto sighed sadly while shaking his head. I see, Lulu said in a low tone before she finally decided to ask, Naruto, what happened to them? They're gone, Naruto said, looking up at the sky as he continued to tell his story to Lulu. They made another attempt to kill Tazuna, the bridge builder. We have to stop them. My teacher fought Zabuza, while we battled Haku. She had special ability, and was very strong. She nearly killed my friend too. Naruto said. He could still remember that moment when he first went berserk with Kurama's chakra. We defeated them. I defeated him, but Haku slipped away and stepped between Kakashi-sensei and Zabuza when my teacher tried to finish him off. Naruto stopped, swallowing hard and taking a deep breath as he recalled that scene in his mind. You don't have to continue, Naruto. Lulu spoke to him and placed her hands around his. It's all right. Naruto smiled and shook his head. Anyway, Zabuza thought nothing of it at first. He even laughed, but in truth, he was distraught at Haku's loss, and when I told him everything Haku told me during our battle, about his feeling for Zabuza, he finally broke down in tears because deep down, he really did care a lot for Haku. He died shortly after he took down Gato himself. Naruto said finally, after everything is over, we built their graves next to each other. Zabuza was a missing nin, a criminal with the title of a demon who was wanted dead by his village. Yeah, he might be evil, but in the end, he was just a man, a very honorable man living the life of a shinobi. Lulu lowered her head, and secretly wiped away the tears that had formed in her eyes. She then widened her eyes when she saw tiny snowflakes falling onto her hand. Hey look, it's snowing. Naruto suddenly called as the two of them looked around and then at the sky as it started snowing. This really takes me back, Haku, Zabuza, the blonde whispered in a low tone as the ship crew and the rest of the party gathered on the deck and looked at the sky in surprise. Feeling amazed by the sudden change in weather, Lulu turned away from the falling snowflakes for a moment to look at Naruto, smiling when she saw the happy grin on his face. The more she knew about the young man, the more she was amazed. From afar on the sky, a beautiful woman with pale blue skin, purple eyes and thickly braided blue hair smiled before turning around and flying away, disappearing into the clouds without leaving any trace but a thin mist of tiny ice crystals and snowflakes. Line break. Here we are. The next morning, Waka said with a small, yet confident smile while pointing his hand to the land in front of them, Port City Luca. Naruto nodded his head and looked at Luca in interest. It was a waterfront city, which had many of the buildings built around the water's edge, with a plethora of jetties and marinas extending from the quay. The city extended far onto the mainland and only stopped where the countryside became mountainous. The most noticeable structure of the city had to be the Blitzball Stadium, which was built out over the water, connected to the rest of the city by a bridge. Their boat seemed to be heading for one of the docks and, he could see the others' piers were mostly occupied. As they drew closer, Naruto could start hearing the commentary coming from speakers placed at various spots around the Key and Stadium, which were full of cheering fans. "Ah, over there. The ships carrying the players are arriving now. This would be dock number 2. The team from Kilika was the first to descend the ramp. They waved as their fans cheered for them. All the way from Kilika, it's the Kilika Beasts. High Summoner Ohaland used to play for them, a big name to live up to. Their hometown was recently attacked by Sin. Isn't that right, Jima?" "Yes, Baba. They're going to be pulling out all the stops to try and bring back the cup this year," Jima added his opinion with a small nod. "Exciting, isn't it, folks?" Baba enthused. Waka walked down the ramp a moment later, followed by the other Aurochs and Titus. "Our next team off the ramp is," Baba seemed to pause in surprise, well. If it isn't the Besaid Aurochs. They're a living, breathing, statistical impossibility. I've never seen a team this bad. That's right. In 23 years they've never made it past the first round. Only a few die-hard fans are in the audience today. Okay, that's a very bad reputation, you know." Naruto chuckled while helping Yuna walking down the wooden panel connecting the deck of their ship and the dock. "Seriously, you guys have never made it through the first round in 20 years. You don't have to rub more salt in our wound, yeah." Waka chuckled nervously while waving his hand at Naruto as he made his way down the dock with the rest of the party. "Best of luck to them and a safe trip back to Besaid," Jima agreed with his company commentator. "Right, Jima. Moving right along, our next team is." The fans on the Key turned to see the team and erupted into hysterical cheering. "Here they are, folks. Our very own Luca goers. They've got power. They've got speed. They've got teamwork. They're an all-around first-class team, and they're back home in Luca," the speaker announced, causing the crowd to get even wilder. "Without a doubt, they are the favorite this year, Baba," Jima agreed with his partner, "and after the way they dominated last year, it'd take a miracle for them to lose today." "You can say that again, Jima. Look at the crowd, folks. Look at the crowd. Looks like all of Luca has turned out to cheer the goers on. They know, I know, and you know, folks. The Luca goers are number 1. I guess it's like this every year." Naruto chuckled as Waka scratched his neck with a sigh. "Yeah, but don't let it bother you, team." He turned to his team, and the other Aurochs could only make murmurs of agreement. Meanwhile, Titus was scowling and looking around at the ardent fans crowding around the goers. When he saw an archaic-looking megaphone lying abandoned on one of the large crates on the pier, a smile crept onto his face. Waka was only beginning to wonder where the new member of his team was when Titus' amplified voice came blaring out over the crowd. "Stop right there, goers. Hey, what are you doing, yeah?" the captain asked worriedly, but the fans and players alike had already turned to look at Titus, who ignored him and went on with his effort. "You guys are smiling now, but not for long," he shouted and pointed his hand at them, "because this year, we Aurochs are taking the cup." There was a pause, then the goers burst into laughter, some were even holding their stomachs as they laughed the loudest. Their fans soon joined in as well, but many others continued to look Titus and the Aurochs curiously, having never seen the young man before. Titus smiled and winked at one of the female fans. She giggled and whispered something to her friend. "What in Yevon's name were you doing up there?" Waka asked in bewilderment as he climbed down off the crates. Titus grinned. "Scare tactics," he suggested, making the party chuckle. Even Lulu wore a small smile to her face while shaking her head. "Still, you get their attention now," Naruto commented with a grin of his own. Then suddenly, he noticed the crowd moving toward the top of the pier and he managed to catch the conversation of someone when they hurried past him and his friend. "Maester Mika is here, already," another person replied. "The number 3 dock. Who's Mika?" Naruto asked curiously, before turning to the others to seek for an answer. He knew what a maester was. His clones had picked up a couple of things while learning Spirin from the people of this world. It was Yuna who answered with an excited look on her face. "Maester Mika has arrived." "You're his fan?" Naruto asked the young summoner, amused by her excitement. "Actually, this tournament is being held to honor his 50th year as maester." Naruto raised an eyebrow in surprise. 50 years was a very long time for someone to stay in that position. Mika had to be either a very good leader for the people to keep vouching for him, or he simply couldn't find anyone to take his place. 50 years. Titus sounded incredulous, shouldn't he be retired by now? But Waka immediately hit him in the ribs with his elbow, pointing out sternly. Mind your mouth now. Well, what are we waiting for? Let's all go see him, Yuna suggested, smiling before she started walking ahead of them. Kimari followed her immediately. Naruto shrugged and went after them as well, leaving Titus behind until he had no other choice but to trail after them. When they arrived, the party could see a luxurious-looking carpet had been laid out at the foot of the ramp, and a troupe of musicians played a fanfare to welcome the maester. Titus craned to see over the heads of the crowd. I can't see anything, he muttered. Naruto was also having the same problem, because he wasn't as tall as the people standing at the front, who were all blitzball players, so they were built heavily with muscles, blocking his view of vision. Here, Lulu took a step back to create some space for them, but unfortunately another person stepped in, making it barely enough for one of them to stand. As quickly as possible, Naruto stepped forward and pushed Titus out of the way, grinning as he looked at the other blonde. "Ha, tough luck, buddy." He grinned before turning around to look at the people making their way down their ship. "Shish," Waka put his finger on his lips and told them. The silence fell over the crowd as someone began to descend the ramp. Naruto took in his appearance swiftly. He was rather young, dressed in blue robes, and his hair was styled too strangely to make him a normal human. His features were longer and sharper as well, making him standing at an even greater height than Waka and Kimari. His hands were large, and fingers extended beyond normal, ending in long fingernails which looked sharper than a blade. Across his forehead, his veins showed predominantly through his skin. For some reason, Naruto didn't like this man one bit, not just because of the smug smirk he was wearing on his face, but also at the way he was looking at the people around him. "He's a half Guado, right?" someone in the crowd muttered. "Isn't that Maester Seymour?" someone replied. Then suddenly, there was a shifting of the people in crowd, and almost as one, they did the prayer gesture. Even Titus, who was forced by Waka, who also tried to make Naruto do the same, but he merely brushed his hand off and continued to stare at Seymour, before turning his eyes to look at the next person to make his way down from the ship. This one, meanwhile, was much older, with a white beard, and was also wearing robes bearing the symbol of Yevon. However, the moment Naruto laid his eyes on him, his eyes widened in shock. Even before he saw the old man, he had had a very bad feeling. Naruto thought it had been because of Seymour, but no, that ugly feeling turned out to mostly come from Mika. "What the hell?" Naruto muttered cautiously, something only Kimari and Lulu could pick up. "People of Spira, I thank you for your generous welcome," he began, his voice deep and rough. "Rise, Maester Seymour. And all of you as well." The man named Seymour then stepped forward graciously. "I present to you." Mika continued while gesturing his hand to the tall Guado, the son of Maester Jiskel Guado, who departed for the far plane a fortnight past. As some of you already know, he has been officially ordained a Maester of Yevon. The half Guado nodded graciously. "I am Seymour Guado. I am honored to receive the title of Maester." The new Maester addressed the crowd. "In life, my father Jiskel worked to foster friendship between man and Guado. I vow to carry on his legacy, and to fulfill my duties as Maester to the best of my abilities." The crowd cheered and bowed once more. Waka poked Naruto's ribs again. "You too, Naruto, bow your head," he murmured. "Like hell I am going to," Naruto muttered. Seymour didn't seem like a good person to him, but he was on the last of the list of problems he was having with the two masters standing in front of them. Still, because he didn't bow his head twice, he immediately stood out, and Seymour turned to look at Naruto, before darting his eyes toward Yuna, who became nervous as she too became aware of the young maester's eyes on her. However, he only looked at her for a moment, before walking away with the old maester. "Really psyches you up, yeah," Waka commented, blowing out a breath. "All right. Last meeting before the match. Hustle. Hey, Lulu." Naruto suddenly grabbed Lulu's hands, causing the busty mage to look at him in surprise. "Can I talk to you for a second?" He then turned to the others. "We will catch up. You guys go on ahead." He didn't wait for them to answer his question and walked away, dragging Lulu with him. The woman was surprised by his action, but she didn't do anything to break her hand away from his and allowed herself to be taken with him to a place that didn't have many people to eavesdrop their conversation. "What is it?" Lulu asked curiously when Naruto let go of her hand and turned around to look at her. That Seymour, he's an ass. Naruto pointed, making the black-haired woman glare at him. However, he's not the real problem. That old man, Mika, he paused for a second before continuing, he's dead. Excuse me, what? Lulu asked in disbelief. He's very dead, you hear. I know a dead person when I saw one, and if you want to know, I have fought dead people before, and yet they are more alive than that old crook. Naruto nodded his head firmly and explained, he gave me that same feeling I felt around the fiends when we defeated them. His emotions also, while not as bad, were the same as theirs. Lulu could only gasp in shock. What did you guys call them again? Those who didn't receive the sending from summoners and later become the fiends because they are envied. Unsent. Lulu interrupted before asking, are you sure about this, Naruto? Are you sure Maester Mika is an unsent? She asked, unable to believe that she had actually said that word in the same sentence with the man the entire Spyro respected. 100%. Naruto nodded his head firmly. Lulu looked away nervously, biting the nail of her thumb as she thought about Naruto's words and then the situation. It was very hard for her. Should she believe Naruto? Was he actually telling the truth? It was clear he didn't like Seymour, but he didn't have any reason to lie to her about Mika. Moreover, he had been nothing but honest to her and the others from the moment he could speak their language. This is bad, very, very bad. Lulu muttered before turning back to Naruto. Naruto, you must not tell this to anyone and keep this between us. They must not know that the beloved leader of Spyro is an unsent. If this information gets out. Sure, you don't have to tell me. Naruto said with his arms crossing on his chest, why do you think I only trust you with it instead of the whole group? Waka will probably try to have my head and use it as his new blitz ball to throw around if I tell him. Did you see how he tried to make me, someone who doesn't believe in Yevon, bow to Mika? Naruto then raised both hands and said with a mocking expression, like hell I am going to. Repeating what he had told Waka earlier, he then lowered his hands before continuing, you think that Seymour guy knows? Those two seem pretty close. I don't know Naruto, none of us have the same ability as you do. Lulu shook her head and held onto her doll tightly, it's hard for me to keep my mind around this, to tell you the truth. Let's just go back to Yuna and the others. I need more time to think. Yeah, don't worry about it. In the meantime, I will keep my eyes on those two. He said, shrugging, the last thing we want right now is Seymour and Mika scheming something evil together, or the later becoming a fiend. We have already had a massive problem to worry about. Yes, do what you must. Lulu nodded her head before walking with Naruto back to reunite with Yuna and the others. Line break. What about the other teams? What about them? What are their tactics? The Aurochs first exchanged glances between each other at Titus' question and then they turned blank looks on their new teammate, how would we know? Standing not too far away and listening to the Aurochs as they discussed their strategies for the upcoming matches, Naruto chuckled in amusement and opened a bottle of energy drink that he bought from a shop before entering the stadium and heading down the locker room for Besaid Aurochs with Lulu. He could see why they hadn't won anything in 20 years. It was clear that while they played the game very serious, they had no idea how to win, at least, not on the same level as Titus, who had to be a professional because some of the tips and advices he was giving his teammates amazed Naruto, someone that didn't know a thing about blitzball. Glancing at Lulu, who was also presenting in the room, he couldn't help but notice that she was strangely quiet. She was probably thinking about the conversation they had earlier. While her faith wasn't as extreme as Waka or even Yuna, which was the reason he chose to tell her instead of them, she was still a Yevon's followers and one who strongly believed in their teachings. It had to be very hard for her to accept that Maester Mika was dead and became an unsent. People seemed to love him, and even Yuna got very excited when she heard he was coming, so Naruto believed Lulu wasn't an exception. Then Naruto remembered Kamari and he thought back at his decision earlier. Would it be better if he decided to tell the Ronso instead of Lulu? She was a very wise woman, she would know what to do, but she was bound by her strict beliefs that would make it hard for her to make the right choices, while all that Kamari cared about was ensuring Yuna's safety. They had become friends after their rough start, but he still didn't know the Ronso that well enough to tell him something like that while not knowing how he would react. Just when the Aurochs were beginning to finish up with their tactics, the door was pushed open abruptly and Yuna entered with Kimahri following shortly behind him, looking worked up. She announced while looking at Titus, "Titus, someone said they saw Sir Orin in a cafe not too far from here." Naruto looked at them in interest. He had heard that name being mentioned a couple of times by Titus while he was talking to Waka, but had no idea who that man was. Titus froze in the act of looking over his shoulder. "Oh, Orin." "Yes, Sir Orin." Yuna looked immensely excited. "We're going to go find him. Do you want to come with us?" Titus looked unsure, but before he could make up his mind, Waka suddenly said worriedly as he rose from his seat, Hey. The game is about to start, yeah. I think you guys should go on ahead. I need to stay here to keep the team together and keep my words to the goers." Titus said while scratching the back of his neck. "Plus, I don't even sure if he's the same Orin I know back home." He reasoned. "I see, that's too bad then." Yuna nodded her head in understanding before looking at Naruto and Lulu. "Lulu, Naruto, do you want to come with me?" "Sure, not like I have anything to do around here." Naruto nodded and stood up, following Yuna as they left the locker room. Lulu walked shortly behind them and remained silent until Naruto decided to start a conversation. "So who is this Orin we are looking for?" he asked, more to Lulu than to Yuna, but the summoner was the one to answer his question. "He's my father's guardian, alongside Sir Jetch, Titus' father." Naruto nodded his head. "He escorted Lord Braska on his pilgrimage to defeat Sin 10 years ago." Lulu finally said in her usual tone, "He's said to be the strongest guardian ever." I'm not so sure about that anymore." Naruto laughed loudly in confidence before glancing to the side when he noticed the players from the Blitzball team Al-Bed Psyches lounging in the hallway and whispering something to each other when the party walked past them and headed into the business district. Some people recognized Yuna, and soon they started gathering around the young summoner in excitement. She bowed to the group of fans, before saying politely, "I'm sorry, please let me through." The crowd parted away immediately allowing Yuna and her guardians to pass. "You're really famous, aren't you, Yuna?" Naruto commented with a smile, and couldn't help but think about the people at his home. Would they do the same when he returned? He was basically a celebrity at home now. Everyone had started calling him the hero of the Fourth Shinobi War. The boys looked up to him, and the girls idolized him, much like how Sakura, Ino and the girls of his class used to fangirling over Sasuke. Every young shinobi in Kunoichi wanted to become someone like him, even going as far as eating at Ichiraku Ramen, which had also become a tourist attraction much to his shock. "Naruto, Spira to Naruto." The blonde blinked when he saw Yuna's hand waving in front of his face while calling out for him, and looked at her curiously, "Are you alright? You spaced out for a moment there." Nothing, I'm just thinking." He grinned and gave her a thumb up. "Well, that's very irresponsible of you, you know." Yuna put her hands on her hips and pouted cutely, "You're my guardian, so you're supposed to protect me. How can you do that if you keep spacing out like that and not paying attention to your surrounding?" But I am not your only guardian, there's still Kimahri and Lulu here." Naruto smiled awkwardly and gestured his hand toward the other guardians. Instead of responding to his statement, Yuna merely smiled and then broke into a playful run. She ran a few feet ahead of her guardian before coming to a stop to look over her shoulder, shouting while waving her hand above her head, "Then I hope we don't get separated." "Are you saying something?" Yuna turned around and flinched in shock when she saw Naruto standing right in front of her with an evil grin on his face. "I told I would always keep an eye out for you, didn't I?" Naruto smirked as he proudly crossed his arms on his chest, "Regardless of where you are. I will be there before you know it." "Naruto," Yuna smiled at him, her heart beating strongly in her chest. A shinobi is not going to fail his mission. Naruto snapped around and pointed his hand forward, striking a dramatically pose as he shouted, so loud the people around him were forced to look. "Now, let's head to that cafe and find this Orin." Without waiting to Yuna, he walked ahead while grinning happily. But before he could get anywhere, Naruto turned around and asked, chuckling nervously while scratching the back of his head, where is that cafe again?" "This way, sir." Yuna giggled playfully as she grabbed his hand and led him to the cafe while Lulu and Kimahri trailing shortly behind them, with the black mage shaking her head with a heavy sigh, her Ronso companion merely crossing his arms on his chest. The group arrived at the cafe but left shortly after they had learnt from a waitress that the man who looked like Oren had already left. However, Yuna didn't give up that easily and continued to travel across the city to look for the man. The whole place felt so alive with various types of entertainments and the excitement of the people in the air. Naruto followed Yuna where she went, catching up to her whenever she tried to test him like earlier. The party also stopped at a couple of shops to buy supply for their journey. "Hey, this is for you," Naruto said as he showed Lulu a Moogle doll he bought from the weapon shop they were taking a look at. "Cheer up," he grinned while shaking the doll around in front of her face. Behind him, Kamari was examining a spear very closely with his hand under his chin, while Yuna, with a new and better staff in her hand, was trying to reason with the shop owner, who was planning to sell the weapons to Yuna and her guardians for free. What do you mean?" the black mage asked, but she knew what he was trying to tell. "You know what I am talking about," Naruto pointed out anyway before continuing. "You're supposed to make the harsh comment every time I do something stupid. Silence doesn't suit you at all." "I was just thinking." The black mage shook her head. "Anyway, I feel much better now, thank you for your concern, but..." She grabbed the Moogle from his hand and looked at it closely. It had very basic stats but had the ability to increase her magic. "You don't have to do this. Where did you even get the money to buy this doll anyway?" "I picked them up after our battles. The fiends dropped a lot of money, you know," Naruto answered. He was the scavenger of their battlefields, and during one of his attempts to collect spheres, he saw some Spira's currency, lying on the ground where the fiends had disappeared into pyre flies. Why did fiends drop spheres and also money when they died was a question Naruto realized he better not knowing the answer, for whatever reason it was. Fine then. I will take this." Lulu held the doll with both hands as she said, "but only because we slew those fiends together. Next time do not try to buy me or anyone anything too specific. It's much better using them to buy better supplies for the whole party." Yeah, I will make sure to remember that." Naruto chuckled before going back to join Yuna and Kamari as they continued their search for Oren. The search for Oren continued. Naruto and the rest of the party walked around, searching for the legendary guardian and asking the people around them every once in a while. Everyone knew Oren, so it wasn't hard for them to spot him among the crowd, which was the reason why Yuna had been able to hear he was in town in the first place. Eventually, after an hour of searching, Naruto and Yuna arrived at a giant bridge that would lead them from the stadium into town, with Kamari and Lulu trailing a short distance behind them. There were many people around the area at the moment, every one of them discussing about the upcoming games excitedly. The bridge itself was made of a light stone, which had been inlaid with mosaics of the team's symbols, with their banners hanging from poles lining the barrier of the walkway. "Man, how are we supposed to find a man in a city like this?" Naruto questioned as the party entered the square, looking around as he tried to spot anyone who stood out from others. From a shopkeeper, he knew Oren was a man with black hair wearing red outfit with sunglasses and carried a massive sword on his back, giving him the appearance similar to a Ronin from his world, but that didn't mean he was the only one doing that around the city. Apparently, he had fans everywhere and many of them came to the blitzball tournament wearing the same outfits as he did to impress the ladies, making it very hard for Naruto to find the man himself. Even if he created a whole bunch of clone and searched every corner of Luca, he wouldn't be able to tell which one of them was the real Oren, because he had no idea what he looked like exactly, something only Yuna and Kamari knew. "Do you know Luca is only the second largest city in Spira?" Yuna told Naruto while walking beside him. "Seriously? Then what's the largest city?" he asked in interest. Yuna smiled, as if she'd known he would. "Bevel," she told him before continuing. "You see, towns are usually not that much bigger than Besaid or Kilika. They're pretty much the same." Yuna's steps became slow as she said, because when a lot of people start to gather, sin comes. Titus took a wild guess, but he knew full it was also the answer to his question. Yuna nodded her head and smiled sadly. "What about Luca here?" he asked, looking around. "It's not safe here as well, isn't it?" "Yes, it isn't any different," Yuna admitted honestly while shaking her head, "but the stadium's here. The Crusaders fight to protect it with all their strength. They only protect the stadium." Naruto asked, "Wouldn't it be more important to protect the people around?" "I guess it's Because blitzball is much more important, mentally and spiritually. It's really the only entertainment that we have, Yuna shook her head sadly. Spyra's a little short on fun these days. Wouldn't it be better if I try to find Sin right now and blow its head off, would it? Naruto asked in a low tone, more to himself than to Yuna as he looked at the sea. He then turned back to Yuna and declared brightly, well, let's return back to our search for Orin, shall we? Nodding her head, Yuna followed Naruto and entered a cafe, which was the only one that was still open, as the others had already closed early so their owners could leave and watch the blitzball games. Naruto looked around, seeing no one met the description of the legendary guardian. You see Orin? He turned to Yuna and asked, to which she shook her head in slight disappointment. Alright, why don't we ask around? Yuna suggested, then walked ahead and blended into the crowds of people minding their own businesses around the cafe. Naruto was about to follow the young summoner, but before he could take a single step, a large figure stepped in front of him. Looking up, Naruto widened his eyes when he realized the one who was blocking his way was actually a very intimidating Ronso, with another one standing beside him. They were both taller and a lot bulkier than Kamari. Hey, it's Kamari. The Ronso with gray fur spoke up as he spotted Kamari, completely ignored Naruto. Kamari stepped forward, but said nothing in response. Why not talk, Kamari? He demanded in a deep growl, not see Yank for 10 years. Say something. Kamari, forget Yank. Forget Byron. Kamari said nothing, but he growled quietly and suppressed anger. Naruto leaned his body to the side and saw Yuna talking with some people, who she was asking about Orin. Seeing him looking at her, Yuna gave him a question look, before silently asking him why he didn't come with her. Naruto simply responded with a smile and told her to wait just a second, raising a finger as he did so without making a sound. Leave Kamari, Yank, Byron told his companion. Kamari is small Ronso. Kamari so small can't see Yank and Byron's faces. Kamari, forget Ronso friends. We taught you much. Yank went on, sounding angry. Byron taught Kamari to be strong Ronso. Maybe taught too much, Byron growled. Abruptly he shoved Kamari on the shoulder. The younger Ronso gave another growl and tightened his fist. However, before he could do anything, Naruto stepped in between them and said wisely. Now gentlemen, or Ronso, there's no need for you to cause a scene here. He declared with a wide grin, making Kamari and the other two Ronso look at him questioningly, with the latter wondering who he was. Let me do that for you. With that, Naruto turned his body around and gave Yank a solid uppercut, sending him out of the cafe through the front door and fell face first on the solid ground. What the? Byron said in surprise and snapped his head to look at Naruto, but before he could do anything, Kamari gave him a square punch in the jaw, stunning him but not enough to take him out like how Naruto did to his companion. Byron tried to attack him with a hook, but Kamari swiftly moved his body to the side with speed and grace that surprised the other Ronso and sent his fist into the Byron's stomach, knocking him back, before raising his foot and kicking him with so much force he sent the taller Ronso out of the cafe and crashing into his friend, who was trying to get up. Kamari, why don't we take this outside? Naruto declared and grinned maniacally while cracking his fist. Kamari crossed his arms on his chest and followed Naruto as the two of them made their way out of the store. Lulu, meanwhile, merely sighed and turned her attention back to Yuna to keep her eyes on her summoner. You mess with my friend, you mess with me, got it? Yank and Byron stood up, growing angrily at the small human companion of Kamari, who remained impassive and walked closely behind the blonde, with his arms crossing on his chest as the two of them approached their opponents. Kamari's friend will pay for that. Byron snarled. Byron is going to beat Kamari's friend up. Naruto would love to see Byron try. The blonde stated mockingly before charging into battle against two giant Ronso with Kamari. Ah, please don't mind them. They are just having fun. Yuna waved her hand and assured the owner of the cafe, who was looking at the chaotic fight outside with a worried expression on his face. Now, I was wondering. However, before she could finish her question, a group of men from Al-Bed Psyches gathered around her and Lulu completely blocked the young woman from Lulu's field of vision as she tried to ask them to step aside. The smile on her face disappeared as she looked at the one who appeared to be their leader, who was the tallest and bulkiest of the group, as he stepped forward and reached his hand out toward her, demanding firmly. Lady Yuna, please come with us. They spoke in Al-Bed Prime, which she could understand perfectly. "Wah, who are you people? What do you want?" Yuna asked and stepped back nervously, trying to avoid being grabbed by the man. When she turned her head and saw Lulu on the other side of the room, trying to force her way through several men wearing the same clothes as the ones grouping around her did, she knew they only wanted trouble. But before his hand could reach Yuna, another hand shot out and grabbed him around the wrist, surprising the Psyche's members. They turned their head and widened their eyes in shock when they saw Naruto standing beside them with a smirk on his face. "Now, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Do you seriously think that I wouldn't notice you idiots following us around? Next time, try to not stand out so much and do it quietly," he said, tightening his grip around the man's wrist so hard it started to hurt him. "Told you I would keep my eyes on you." Naruto turned to Yuna and gave her a broad grin, making the young summoner nod and smile in relief. "Wah, how?" one of the men in the group asked, pointing his hand between Naruto and the one who was fighting with Kamari outside. "There are two of you." "Yeah, don't you know I can do that?" Naruto asked, smirking widely before taking his hand back and punching the man square in the face. "I can do this too." His punch was so hard Naruto broke the man's jaw and sent him flying across the cafe before crashing into the wall, leaving a huge crater in the process. "Sorry, I will make sure to keep the destruction as minimum as possible." Naruto turned to the owner and told him. "Now, which one of you idiots is ready to lose some teeth before telling me what is that you want with Yuna?" The entire team of Al-Bed Psyches looked at Naruto nervously, but they could only hear the sound of knuckles cracking next before going through an entire world of pain. Later. "Well, that's the last of them," Naruto said as he dusted his hands and looked at the unconscious, beaten-up members of the Al-Bed Psyches. Kamari and Lulu had joined the fight shortly after it broke out when Yank and Byron finally decided to retreat with their tails between their legs, and Lulu finally decided she had had enough of their nonsense and basted them away with a massive ball of fire, which was much larger and more powerful than the ones Naruto had seen so far. While beating them up, Naruto had found out that they had been trying to kidnap Yuna so that they could force Waka and his team to lose, even paying Yank and Byron to make a scene so that they could remove Kamari, the one they thought was Yuna's strongest guardian. Still, with their combined efforts, the party managed to defeat every one of them just in time for them to see Titus, Waka and the other members of Besaid Aurochs triumphed victoriously inside the water sphere on the TV scene in the cafe. "Hey, we won!" Yuna exclaimed excitedly while clapping her hands and holding her wizard rod closely to her. "We finally made it to the final this time. It appears that Waka took a beating from them, but I guess he will make it." Looking at Waka, who were wincing painfully as his teammates gathered around to hug him, Lulu said simply before turning her head to look at Naruto, who was pickpocketing the leader of the Al-Bed Psyches. "What are you doing?" She continued to watch as Naruto pulled out some gil from the pockets of the unconscious thug. "You're going to steal from them?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Hey, don't blame me." Naruto grinned as he moved to the side, finding some more money from the other thugs, as well as a couple of items, such as potion and ether. He had no use for them, but the other members of the party might need them later. "Fiends drop money when they disappear, these guys don't disappear, so I will have to collect them myself," he explained before standing up. "Serves them right for trying to pull that bullshit on Titus and the others. I really hate people who play dirty like this to win." Lulu nodded her head in understanding, and she did not pursue the conversation further after that. "Everyone, I guess we won't be able to find Sir Orin like this." Yuna then stepped forward and informed them, "Let's head back to the stadium. The next match is going to be the final. We should be there to cheer for them." "Your choice, Yuna." Naruto grinned and paid the owner of the cafe for the drinks as well as the damages they had caused before leaving with the party. Looking at the massive screen near the stadium, Naruto saw it playing highlights of the match between the previous matches as well as broadcasting the results of the other games. The first game had been the Kilika Beasts versus the Guado Glories, with the latter triumphing over their opponent in the end before going on to play the winner of the second match, which were the Goers after they had destroyed Ronso Fangs. It didn't take it long for them to beat the other team, and earned themselves a shot at the final against the Aurochs. They went to the team's locker room to congratulate the team for their victory over a very strong team, as well as to tell about what had happened during the match. "Seriously, can't believe some Al-Bed tried to capture Yuna. Waka muttered in annoyance while holding his rib. Good thing that we have you there to make sure she's safe, Naruto. The blonde grinned and gave him a thumb up in return. You sure you okay, Captain? Dato asked anxiously. The game starts in a few minutes, Letty added. We're playing the goers too. Jasu looked scared stiff by the thought. Waka sat up slowly. No time for warm-ups then. He chuckled then looked at Titus, ready. Titus made a fist. Lemme have them, he said with a bloodthirsty grin. All right, Waka sighed and stood up. I've something to tell you boys, after this game. I will think about retiring. The team looked shocked and started to protest, but the captain went on. I promised myself this would be my last tournament. Win or lose, I'm quitting Blitzball to become a full-fledged guardian. The then continued with a massive smile, but you know, since we're here, we might as well win. Yeah, the Aurochs shouted in unison. Line break. So, this is our seats? Naruto asked, excitedly as he made his way toward 4 empty chairs among the crowd of people sitting at the stands and watching the match between Aurochs and goers in the stadium with Yuna, Lulu and Kamari. The match had already started and players were swimming in the water sphere at great speed, trying to get the blitz ball into the opponent's goal as soon as they got the opportunity to do so. I believe it is. Yuna nodded her head and checked her tickets for the final time to make sure they didn't get it wrong. The group sat down and Naruto cheered as Titus scored another goal for their team. Yeah, go Titus. Give them hell. Naruto screamed at the top of his lungs, causing the people around them to turn and look at him strangely. Lulu gave him an annoyed look with both hands covering her ears because she was sitting right beside him at his right. Yuna simply broke out into laughter before she cheered alongside her guardian. Meanwhile, Kamari kept his stoic expression and watched the match in silence. I thought you didn't like Blitzball. Lulu asked him when Naruto finally sat down. Hey, not knowing how to play has nothing to do with me not liking the game. It's kinda exciting, you know. Naruto grinned. You don't like Blitzball? Naruto asked when he saw the faraway look in Lulu's eyes when she turned back to watch the match. Chappu played the game too. She gave a short answer, but that was more than enough to let him understand. Popcorn. Naruto offered with a grin, holding the popcorn bag in front of the busty black mage. Where did you even, you know what? Forget it. Lulu shook her head in defeat before reaching out and gathering a handful of popcorn in her hand. Thank you. She gave him a small smile before looking away, knowing that he was trying to cheer her up yet again. You're welcome. Naruto turned back to the match and exclaimed in annoyance when the goalkeeper of the Aurochs couldn't stop the goers, player from scoring a goal for his team. Hey, the hell are you idiots doing? Defense, defense, defend, but he suddenly stopped and abruptly stood up, snapping his head around with his eyes widening in shock. There, standing near the top of the stadium, was a tall man in his mid-30s, having black hair with gray streaks held back by a gold ribbon. He had a scar over the right half of his face and over his eye, very similar to the one Kakashi had, covering by black sunglasses. For clothing, he wore a red haori closed with a black and blue strap with 2 brown belts wrapped around it. The man tucked his left arm into the front of his haori, making it look as though his arm was in a sling, with a black armored gauntlet on his right hand, and an armor brace on his left forearm. In addition, he also wore black pants and shoes that have brown straps and triangular metal plating, with a black shirt with a high gray collar, a brown shoulder pad on his left shoulder intricately decorated with tan, green and blue patterns having a beaded ornament dangling from it. What is it, Naruto? Yuna asked curiously as she looked at Naruto and then at the direction he was looking at, that is, Sir Orin. She exclaimed in surprise and stood up as well. That's Orin, Naruto asked, looking at the summoner before turning back to the man, but he, however, at that moment, screams filled the air, but they were born from fear rather than excitement. Naruto snapped his head around and saw a dozen aquatic fiends, reminiscent of huge fish with sharp teeth, swimming into the water sphere and surrounding the players. What the hell? Naruto exclaimed in surprise as he grabbed Yuna by her head and pushed her down before crouching down as well to avoid the claws of a huge lizard-type fiend that lunged at them. Around the stadium, other fiends were appearing in hordes as people tried to run for their life, with flying beasts dove around the stadium from the sky, lashing out at people with their claws and fangs. Go Naruto, Yuna told him, and the blonde had no reason to do otherwise. Nodding his head, Naruto leapt into the air and threw 2 shuriken at 2 flying beasts, eliminating them without a trace. Grabbing onto another one when it shot down at him from the sky, Naruto pulled out a kunai from his back pocket and sharpened it with his chakra before slicing the fiend's throat open as he dropped down to another horde of monsters. On the other side, Kimari and Lulu were also holding their ground against the fiends, protecting Yuna while she was healing those who were injured and defending every person that they came across. Using a very powerful version of her usual blizzard spell, Blizzara, the busty black mage took out a group of flame flan that were trying to attack them, opening a path for Kimari to charge forward and leapt into the air, pushing his spear down to increase his jump even higher before crashing down an epaya, killing it before it could even realize what was coming. Meanwhile, Naruto crashed into a massive behemoth with his Rasengan, grinding the swirling orb of energy into its flesh, before blasting it away calculatedly without hitting anyone and taking several smaller monsters with it. Satisfying with his result as the monster dispersed into pyre flies, Naruto dashed across the stadium, bringing down monster after monster, faster than the members of the Crusader could do at the same time. This boy, the man, Orin, muttered as he and many more looked at Naruto, trying to keep up with his speed and movements as he took down several powerful fiends all by himself. His weapons, while small, emitted an aura that allowed him to cut through the armored fiends like a hot knife through butter, a feat not even his weapon and his swordsmanship could archive, before finishing them off with a powerful technique from the palm of his hand. After a moment of studying the young man while he was keeping several people safe as they made their way to the exit, Orin turned back to the fiends approaching him and removed the sword from his back, holding it with only one hand. The armored fiend lowered its head with an animalistic growl and Orin wasted no time to get into position for a counter-attack. Freeing his left arm from his red overcoat, Orin brought his sword down from his shoulder, holding it with both hands, allowing the weight of his weapon and his own strength to cut through the fiend's neck, killing it instantly before it had the chance to hit him. Without looking at the monsters as it dissolved into pyre flies, Orin snapped his body around and performed a series of strikes that took down every monster that tried to attack him, causing the people around him to look at him in awe and amazement. However, he knew there were more monsters than that, and when he heard a low growl on his left, Orin turned toward that direction and brought his sword up, blocking the claws of the fiend and countering with a strike from below, sending it crashing into the near stand before disappearing. Another flyer came and attacked him, but Orin was quick to dodge and killed it with another swing of his weapon. But before he could raise his sword once again, another fiend lunged at him, a type that was very well known for its quickness. Orin braced for the attack, but it could never reach him and the monster itself was kicked away by Naruto, who appeared in a swirl of leaves and sent his foot straight into its abdomen, with such force it did not even have the chance to crash into anywhere and disperse right in the spot. Naruto then landed on his feet, but immediately snapped around when he realized he and Orin were being circled by a horde of dingo and Dinonics. Back to back, the two said nothing and merely turned their heads to look at the other, before snapping back and making their moves at the same time, attacking the monsters around them relentlessly and taking them out of the battle faster than anyone could ever hope to match them. "Are you Orin?" Naruto questioned. "You're Yuna's guardian," the samurai replied, to which Naruto nodded his head. "I know what you are. You're not supposed to be here," Naruto said shortly as he jumped over Orin's head and kicked the monster that tried to attack him directly from the front away. "And how do you know that exactly?" the legendary guardian asked calmly, his expression remaining unchanged even though inwardly, he was wondering how the boy could notice such thing from him. "I can feel it," Naruto told him and threw his kunai without looking, killing a fiend halfway across the stadium right on the spot. "Interesting." Orin made a small smirk under his collar as he looked at Naruto under his black sunglasses. "Pleased to make your acquaintance, young man. My name is Naruto Uzumaki," Naruto said as he took out another kunai from his pocket. "I'm Orin." The guardian of Braska nodded his head. Just when Naruto was about to deal with the next fiend to come his way and intended to tap into Kurama's chakra to handle every one of them at the same time, he heard a collective gasp from the crowd. An alluring sound echoed around the stadium, and it was the sound of a summoning. Naruto looked at Yuna, expecting her to summon Valifor from the sky, but instead, several pillars of ice fell down from above, crashing into each other behind a young woman who was making her way down from the top of the stadium. She was a breathtakingly beautiful woman with long pink hair, fair skin and yellow eyes. She wore a revealing pure white robe with widened sleeves that revealed the top of her impressive bust and her toned belly, the bottom being an elongated loincloth with gold pattern on the front, leaving her legs and the sides of her hips bare. She also had a horned accessory on her head and wore pink heels with white socks. With a smile on her face, she raised her staff and said loudly, "Come forth." Behind her, a sparkle appeared in the air, growing as it descended and entered the icy pillars, taking on the form of a woman, whose cold beauty was undeniable. Wreathed in a set of clothes that clung to her figure and revealed so much that they looked more like underwear in proper outfit, the Aeon then opened her silver blue eyes and shattered the ice around her to set herself free. Her pale blue skin shone with an effervescent sheen under the sun, and her blue hair, done up in braids, gave her a queenly appearance as she floated behind her summoner and caused the temperature to drop significantly. With a smile on her face, the Aeon Shiva raised her hands, generating several icy spears from thin air and gracefully swiped her hands around, sending the spears at every monster within the stadium, impaling into their fleshes and cleanly ending them without leaving a trace behind. Several behemoths tried to attack her and her summoner, but the Aeon merely raised her hand and blew an icy breath at them, freezing them right on the spot before they could even do anything. Within seconds, every fiend in the stadium was taken care of, leaving Naruto and many others to look at the summoner and her Aeon in awe and surprise. "Wow," Naruto admitted honestly as he looked at the fiends erupting into fire flies, "that is amazing. It's Shiva. She is one of the most powerful Aeon, but also the hardest to gain complete control over." Orin nodded his head and answered calmly, "This is my first time seeing that Aeon. Not even Braska was able to call for her aid in his journey, and yet, there's a summoner capable of doing so." Naruto whistled in amazement while looking at the beautiful Aeon as she floated around in midair. Her summoner, meanwhile, was looking at a certain half-guado standing on the large balcony above the galley, who were also looking at her with a small smirk on his face, but the look in his eyes told them that he was annoyed. Seymour had previously tried to summon his Aeon, but failed to do so because the pink-haired summoner had made her move first. Then suddenly, Shiva turned her head and looked at Naruto's direction. Naruto could swear she was looking directly at him, but the moment their eyes met, her physical form started fading away. She soon disappeared completely moment later in a thin mist of snowflakes and fire flies. With that, the summoner turned away and silently made her way to the exit, leaving without saying anything to anyone. "I guess that's the end of it," Naruto said finally as he turned to Orin, "Now, in case you. However, Naruto was interrupted when Titus stepped in between the two of them and pointed his hand at the older man, crying out loud, "Who the hell are you anyway?" He asked in frustration, "You knew my father, didn't you?" Orin nodded his head slowly. "Yeah," was what he said in response. I think I will leave you two to each other for now." Naruto spoke up, "However, don't you think this is over? We will have a nice little chat about what you are later, got it?" Naruto asked and turned around to walk away as Orin simply nodded his head in response. Naruto quickly made his way toward Yuna and the rest of the party as they sat down to rest after the battle, with the young summoner using her white magic to take care of Wakka's wound while he sat on a chair beside her, spinning his blitz ball on the tip of his index finger. It appeared that he had been injured during the match with Goers, and his fights with the fiends inside the water sphere had taken a great toll on his body. "You guys all right?" Naruto asked, looking at his friends to check for any injuries. To his relief, they didn't appear to be hurt. "We're fine, thank you," Yuna told him with a smile, her wizard rod glowing with healing magic. "What about you?" "Yeah, I'm fine too, don't worry." The shinobi grinned before turning around and pointing his hand at Orin, who was talking to Titus. "So, that's Orin," he said, and his words came out more as a statement than a question. "Yes, that's him." Yuna nodded her head with a bright smile. "So that's how it is," the blonde muttered in a low tone as he looked at both Titus and Orin. Lulu, meanwhile, was studying Naruto in silence while feeling a bit unsettled. She knew the look on his face. It was the same look he had had when he decided to tell her Mika was an unsent. "Still, where do you think those fiends came from, ya?" Wakka asked in curiosity. "There were so many of them I didn't even bother to count." "Beat me." Naruto shrugged. "So you're saying that you didn't know they were coming? Maybe I didn't pay that much attention to my surroundings during the match, but surely I should have been able to sense at least some of them before they arrived to attack us." There was literally a small army of fiends there. Naruto answered Lulu's question, if you're asking me, I will say that someone here let them out right here. Naruto does have a point, Kamari spoke up with a nod of his head. That's a scary thought. Waka admitted with a nod of his head, still, did you see her, that summoner, handling all those fiends? She's so amazing, to be able to summon Shiva and defeat them all like that. Yuna commented as she finished healing Waka and stood up, gripping her wizard rod tightly in her hand. I wish I can become a strong summoner like she is. I'm sure that you will. Saying that, Naruto placed a hand on Yuna's shoulder, smiling encouragingly. Thank you, Naruto. The young summoner smiled and nodded her head. Yeah, I guess it's time for us to leave. Waka said as he stood up, stretching his arms and shoulders, the sooner we return to Yuna's pilgrimage, the better. The match is ruined anyway. He said but didn't sound that disappointed. You are really leaving Cap? A young member of his team, Dato asked as he and his teammates lowered their heads sadly. Come on, look sharp, Waka told them with a small smile, the Blitz season has just started. Playing like today and you guys will be just fine on your own. He stepped forward and patted Dato on his shoulder, making him smile before nodding his head. The other members of the team followed, as they all cheered for their captain as well as their short-time teammate, who was making his way back with Orin following shortly behind him. Sir. Yuna lowered her head to the man who had accompanied her father on his pilgrimage to gain the final Aeon to defeat Sin, wearing a smile on her face as looked at him. Standing around her, her guardians except for Naruto, did the same thing to show respect to the man who had brought them the calm with Braska and Jekt, who was possibly Titus' father, 10 years ago. Yuna. Orin greeted her before continuing rather straightforwardly, I wish to become your guardian on your journey. He told her calmly, do you accept? Are you serious? Lulu asked in surprise. Orin gave her a blank expression before replying, you refuse. No, Yuna interjected quickly while shaking her head, we accept. Right everyone. Oh of course, Waka added enthusiastically, no problem. But, why? Lulu asked, giving the man in red a probing look. Orin turned his eyes and glanced at Naruto who continued to look at him suspiciously, knowing full well he was also wondering the same thing. Orin gave a light smile before giving Yuna his answer, I promised Braska, he said simply. Yuna put a hand to her mouth subconsciously, you promised my father. She whispered emotionally before bowing her head to the legendary guardian yet again, thank you Sir Orin. You're welcome to join us. Orin nodded his head and shot his hand out to grab Titus by the collar of his shirt. I would like for this guy to come too. Saying that, he pushed the Blitz player up to stand in front of the group. This one, however, I promised Jekt. Orin informed them as Titus crossed his arms and looked away. Yes. Nodding her head at Titus, Yuna then looked at him, is Sir Jekt alive? She asked hopefully. Orin paused, can't say. Haven't seen him in 10 years, he said, making Naruto narrow his eyes to look at the man suspiciously, doing that obviously enough for Orin to see that he didn't believe a single word he was saying. I'm serious. The man added calmly, readjusting his glasses. Nah, I don't believe you. Naruto said final while waving his hand. We'll meet him eventually, I'm sure. Yuna smiled and nodded her head, I'll look forward to it, she replied. Orin looked down briefly then up at Lulu, immediately marking her as the sensible one, what's our itinerary? Where are we headed? He asked. Jose Temple, sir. The busty black mage answered with a nod of her head. Off we go then, the sooner we get there, the better. Don't forget to smile everyone. Yuna said enthusiastically before leading her guardians out of the stadium, stopping at a couple of shops for Naruto to restock their items and distribute the spheres he had been able to collect during the battle at Lucas Stadium, allowing every member of the party except himself to increase their powers further, even Orin who received his fair share of the sphere from the young man who had not ceased to amaze him with his abilities. You should get used to it, sir, was what Lulu had told him. I will tell you more when we get to the temple. The group quickly made their way up the second flight of stairs leading out of the city. Naruto put his hand above his head and took a moment to look at the road in front of them, seeing a long winding dust road, fringed with green grass, with old ruins and pillars along the verge. There were many people wandered along the road, stretching away from either side, rolling green plains extended beyond what the eyes could see. Hey, isn't that, Titus suddenly said as he pointed his hand to the person who was standing next to one of the pillars on the road, with a hand on her hip and the other holding a magic rod while her foot tapping impatiently on the ground. It was the summoner from before, the one who had summoned Shiva. Is she waiting for someone? Waka asked while scratching his neck. At that moment, the woman suddenly turned her head and looked directly at them. Miham Hirode. Is she waiting for someone? Waka asked while scratching the back of his neck, wonder where her guardian is. At that moment, the pink-haired woman suddenly turned her head and looked directly at them. Well, I guess that's us. Naruto commented when he saw the summoner raising her hand and waved it at them while smiling a bit. Seeing no reason to not come over and greet her, the party made their way toward the pink-haired summoner, with Yuna being the first who stepped forward to greet her with the traditional prayer. My name is Yuna, she said with her head bowing low, it's an honor to meet you. Ah yes, you're the High Summoner's daughter. The pink-haired woman said with a small smile, gesturing her hand toward Yuna, I have heard much of you, Yuna. My name is Citra, pleased to make your acquaintance. She smiled at Yuna before doing the same to her guardians, most specifically Naruto, who she stared at for a moment. The young shinobi merely crossed his arms over his chest and looked right back at her challengingly, but Citra merely gave a small smile. Yuna began slowly, Lady Citra. Please call me Citra. Citra interrupted, we both are summoners, there's no need for you to address me as such. Yes, Citra. Yuna nodded her head with a small smile as she continued, on behalf of the people of Spira, I want to thank you for what you did at Lucas Stadium, if it weren't for you we wouldn't have been able to. Please don't mention it, Yuna. I did what had to be done to protect everyone. Surely you would do the same if you had the chance. Shaking her head, Citra answered and then continued while looking at Naruto, plus, even without my help, this young man here would have taken care of all of them just fine. She then crossed her arms under her ample bust before asking, he's your guardian, correct? Yes. Yuna nodded her head and looked at Naruto with a warm smile. Such a shame, Citra shook her head with a disappointed smile, and here I thought I could ask him to become mine. Now that you mention it, Lady Citra, may I ask where your guardian is? Waka spoke up before Citra could continue. I actually don't have one, at least, not yet. Citra answered, making Yuna and her guardians look at her in surprise. You are already a summoner and yet you don't have a guardian. Waka continued to press the matter, but isn't that? The concept of a summoner's guardian was based on the first summoner to defeat Sin, Yunalesca, who had been protected by her husband, Lord Zaun. After the formation of the Church of Yevon, a summoner being protected by their guardian as per Yunalesca and Zaun's example was adopted as doctrine. Because of that, no summoner had ever started their pilgrimage without at least one guardian at their side. I told you I did not have a guardian, at least not yet, didn't I? The pink-haired summoner answered calmly while looking at, actually sounding a bit annoyed. Perhaps you should let me take over from here, Citra. Citra opened her mouth to continue, but before she could say anything, a voice that was equal parts ice and seduction whispered in their ears, and she appeared before them. The temperature suddenly dropped, as icy particles streamed through the air and gathered at a single point beside Citra, before taking on the shape of an otherworldly beautiful woman. The ground underneath her feet froze as Shiva appeared before them. Wearing the same outfit as she did the first time they had seen her, with her dark blue hair done in braids, she was like a queen composed of ice, cold yet elegant. Lady Shiva. As the party looked at her in shock and awe, Citra smiled at the beautiful Aeon, who was floating above the ground with a hand on her hip while looking at Yuna and her guardians, humming contemplatively as she smiled at them, or more specifically, at Naruto. Greeting, young summoner Yuna and her guardians. Shiva said and smiled in a manner that was somehow both elegant and incredibly sensual. Yuna and her guardians except for Naruto, Orin and Titus immediately lowered their heads and did the tradition praying gesture to show their respect to the Aeon. Hold on, you can talk. Titus asked in surprise while staring wide eyes at the blue-haired woman in front of him. And how can you appear like that? I thought you have to be summoned by summoners too. Of course I can talk. Most of us can. It's simply the matter of what I want and what I don't want to do. Shiva interrupted and answered elegantly before giving the blitzball player an ice-cold smile, colder than the power that she wielded. Oh, and next time, do not talk to me unless I am talking to you. Titus immediately stepped back and gulped nervously. That smile was colder than the temperature of the air around him, which had dropped significantly since the moment Shiva appeared. He could even start seeing his breath now. Good, now, you. She turned her head back to Naruto and smiled a smile that was so warm it contrasted her power, causing Citra to look between Naruto and her Eon for a moment before gaping lightly in realization. You have no idea how long I have been waiting for this moment to finally meet you, Naruto Uzumaki. Slowly, she floated over until she was mere feet away from Naruto, and placed a hand on his cheek. Her skin was extremely cold, and Naruto grimaced, expecting to be frozen solid. However, much to his surprise, her hand didn't freeze his head like a popsicle like how he thought it would. You know me? Naruto asked finally as Shiva's eyes narrowed and her lips curved into a wondrous smile. Yes, of course, I know you, because after all, I was the one who brought you to this world. Naruto whispered breathlessly in surprise, while Yuna and the others, those who knew about Naruto, his origin and how he had come to Spira, gaped in shock. Orin, meanwhile, had his expression hidden well behind the collar of his shirt and sunglasses. Without them, anyone could tell that he was even more surprising than the others. I believe I owe you an apology for taking you away from a world that has started calling you their hero, don't I? Shiva asked softly while caressing his cheek. Ah, it's alright. I'm not mad or anything, really. Naruto shook his head with a forced grin, but still. You could have at least given me a warning before teleporting me here. I couldn't, actually, and also I didn't think it was wise to talk to you while you were in the middle of an intense battle. We Eons have some powers over space and time, but they're very limited. Shiva smiled and took her hand back before her body shifted until it looked like she was sitting down with one leg crossed elegantly over the other. And to tell you the truth, it took me a lot to bring you to this world, let alone to where I was at the time. Wait, so you're saying that I randomly ended up in the middle of nowhere near Besaid Island? Naruto exclaimed dramatically, what the hell, woman? You could have dropped me into a volcano or somewhere like that. As the other's sweat dropped, Shiva merely stared at him before chuckling softly into her hand. I see, so that's how it is. I know I have made the right choices. Shiva said before asking, anyway, do you know the reason why I brought you here? You want me to help save this world, don't you? Naruto replied with his own question. No. Shiva nodded then shook her head with a smile, I want to help you save this world. I'm a bit confused here. Naruto crossed his arms over his chest and hummed thoughtfully, so, you mean I can't defeat Sin on my own? No, it's quite opposite actually. From what I have seen so far, you alone are more than enough to defeat Sin. Shiva explained seriously, causing everyone around them to gasp in shock. However, as you have already known, Sin always returns. You can defeat Sin 10,000, 10 million times, but it will keep coming back no matter what you do and what techniques that you use to end it. It has continued like this for hundreds of years. What make you think the cycle won't repeat itself if you're the one who takes down Sin? You want to make it permanently, don't you? Naruto nodded his head. That was quite easy to understand, even for him. He could see the logic in her explanation, and couldn't help but agree with it. That creature is not something that you can beat completely with just brute force, which is the reason why you will need a summoner in this matter. She then moved to the side and gestured her hand to Shiva. Being the first to realize Shiva's plan, Yuna spoke up with a small gasp. Does that mean, you want Citra to become Naruto's summoner? That's correct. Shiva nodded her head. Citra has prepared her entire life to become Naruto's summoner. She is the summoner that I planned for Naruto. With her help, he will be able to vanquish Sin and bring the eternal calm to the people of Spira. Is such thing possible, an eternal calm? Waka asked, sounding somewhat nervous. Of course, Citra has everything that she needs to provide the necessary supports for Naruto on this journey. She has prepared her entire life for it, even finishing most of her pilgrimage before coming here to meet him. Shiva then turned to Naruto. Naruto, meanwhile, can protect her from anything, even from Sin itself. Every Eon has their own plan to take down Sin. She took a split second to look at Titus and Orin, but no one was able to see her doing so, as Naruto was busying with his thoughts, and I am not an exception. Naruto and Citra is my answer to the problem that has been poisoning this world. But I am already Yuna's guardian. The blonde spoke up finally. I'm sure she will understand, won't you, young summoner? Shiva asked, looking at Yuna, who became a bit troubled by that. She stuttered, trying to find the right words to answer the ice Aeon, but fortunately for her, Naruto saved her the trouble by speaking up again. I'm sorry, but I don't think I can do that. I have already promised to protect Yuna on her pilgrimage across Spira, and I never go back on my words, because that's my ninja way. He said firmly with a determination that truly surprised everyone, even Shiva. Naruto, Yuna smiled softly while looking at Naruto as she held her hand in front of her chest. I see, Citra, what do you think? Do you have anything to say? The Aeon asked and turned her body around to look at the pink-haired summoner. Citra looked at Naruto and then at Yuna before saying, closing her eyes as she did so, I want to defeat Sin. Believe me, I really do, and it's everything that I have ever wanted. But I know I will need a guardian to do that. She then paused and opened her eyes before continuing with a smile, however, I can't force Naruto to abandon his summoner and ask him to become mine either. She shook her head, plus, Naruto doesn't need me as his summoner in particular, so anyone should be fine. We all want the same thing, don't we? So it doesn't matter how or who in the end when it's all over. Shiva smiled, I understand and will respect your decision. But Citra, you have prepared your entire life for this, are you going to throw all of your efforts away just like that? Of course not, because I can use all that I have learnt for another purpose. Citra shook her head and turned to Yuna, asking her with a gesture of her hand, Yuna, I can see you have the potential to become a strong summoner, but you're still fresh on the road, are you not? Yes, I am. Yuna nodded and answered honestly. Then I might have a few things to teach you. The pink-haired woman smiled as she continued, why don't we have a match, summoner to summoner? Yuna made a sound in surprise. Not to the death, of course. It's the fastest and easiest way for me to see how powerful your Aeons are, and to prove to Lady Shiva here that you're worthy to become Naruto's summoner. Citra laughed softly into her hand and said, so, what do you say? Are you up to the challenge? Yuna gripped her wizard robe tightly in her hand before nodding her head determinedly, I'll do my best. With that, Yuna's guardians and Shiva took their steps back as the two summoners walked to the middle of the field, a bit away from the main road to make sure no one would be caught in their battle. Naruto stood next to Shiva and looked at the summoners as they prepared for the summoning. As his eyes turned to Citra, he suddenly remembered something and decided to ask, wait, you said Citra had prepared her entire life to become my summoner, so you had to tell her about me when she began her training. How old is she? How long have you known me? You don't have to worry. Shiva answered coolly without taking her eyes away from the two summoners, my time spending looking at your world was only enough for me to decide that you're the best hope this world has. I only did it once every few years for a few hours or so, as I also needed a lot of time to build up enough power to create a portal to bring you to Spira. It was a tiring and exhausting process, but it was worth it. Thank you, I guess. Naruto chuckled nervously while scratching the back of his head before turning back the summoners while musing thoughtfully. With a blinding flash of light, both summoners used their magic and summoned their Aeons. For Yuna, it was Valifor, who appeared in the cloud and shot down at high speed and stopped above Yuna, flapping her wings as she hovered behind her summoner. Citra, meanwhile, summoned an Aeon Naruto had never seen before. The ground around her cracked and exploded, scorching the ground with intense fire, which then spread across the field with a massive glowing magic circle in the middle. A pillar of molten rock and flame then emerged, and a humanoid, demonic-looking beast appeared. From it, he had a reddish-brown complexion with light red hair, and a bulky appearance, with black horns and massive claws extending from his hands. Shattering the pillar with his powerful arms, the demonic-looking Aeon landed on the ground beside Citra, roaring loudly as he breathed fire from his mouth. This is Ifrit, the Aeon of Fire. Now Yuna, show me how strong you are. Citra said as Ifrit roared and generated a shockwave that nearly knocked Yuna back, forcing her to raise her arms to shield her face from the heat. Fortunately for her, Valifor quickly moved in between them and used her wings to shield her summoner while glaring daggerly at the other Aeon. Whoa, Waka and Titus said in amazement, can Yuna really defeat that? She can't. Orin answered calmly. That Aeon looks so strong, why didn't Yuna summon it instead of Valifor? Titus asked in confusion, she also acquired him at Kilika Temple, right? Because Yuna has the more experience with Valifor than with Ifrit, who she acquired only recently. Lulu explained. Also, Lady Citra's Ifrit may be very different from the one called by Yuna, as an Eon's attributes rise with those of their summoner, which is also the reason why he looks so much stronger than Valifor. Valifor, use Blizzard to attack them. Yuna gave the order, and the winged Eon immediately used her spell, causing her body to glow a rainbow aura before flapping her wings, sending a wave of icy wind at Citra and Ifrit, attempting to freeze them. Ifrit merely stood still and heated up his body to the point it caught fire and protected both him and his summoner, who didn't appear to be affected by the heat in the slightest. The cold winds vaporized without a trace before it could reach the two. Strike her down, Ifrit. Citra smiled and raised her hand as Ifrit gathered his fire into an orb of energy in front of him and hit it with his claw, sending it toward Valifor, who folded her wings around her body to protect herself as soon as she realized it was too fast for her to dodge. The orb exploded upon contact and knocked Valifor back, skidding a long way on the ground before she quickly got back up and flew into the air, with smoke coming from the scales of her wings. Ifrit then rushed forward and jumped into the air to attack Valifor with his claws, surprisingly fast for a beast his size, but the winged Eon quickly moved her body out of the way before he could reach her and then attacked him with a barrage of energy rays from the magic circle that appeared in front of her body, causing a huge explosion that completely swallowed her fellow Eon. However, as Valifor was about to use her next attack, Ifrit emerged, swiping his flaming hand to disperse the smoke around him, then generated an intense amount of fire from his body before slashing his other hand horizontally across the air, creating an enormous tornado of fire that matched toward Valifor, who only had enough time to use her wings to shield herself before she was swiped away. Valifor howled in pain as she was hurled her into the air before falling to the ground heavily behind Yuna when the tornado finally disappeared with smoke coming out of her body, which was badly hurt by Ifrit's attack. Valifor, Yuna worriedly ran to her Eon and quickly used her white magic to heal her, easing the pain that she was feeling and healing several burns before allowing her to disappear into pyre flies. Thank you so much. She lowered her head and then turned around to look at Citra as she also thanked Ifrit for his effort before letting him disperse into pyre flies and vanish, leaving only the destruction that he had caused behind. Citra then walked to Yuna and raised her staff, causing her entire body to glow an ethereal aura before saying, "There. Valifor should be fine now. Thank you, Citra." Yuna lowered her and gave the pink-haired summoner a smile. "You are so strong, and you still have a lot to learn." Citra replied as Yuna's guardians approached them, "But you show promise, more than I do." "Thank you," the younger summoner said with a bright smile. "That was quick, but Valifor did fine for a young summoner like you." Shiva commented, "You still need more training." "I understand," Yuna said before she turned to question Citra. "What are you going to do now, Citra?" "I don't know, but I think I will visit a local inn and." "Why don't you come with us too?" It was Naruto, with his trademark grin on his face, causing everyone to turn their head to look at him, most of them unable to believe what he had said. Naruto, do you know what you are saying?" Waka asked nervously as he stepped to stand in front of Naruto. "Two summoners can't travel together. It has never happened before. Doesn't mean it can't happen now, can it? I don't see anything wrong with two summoners who wish for the same thing traveling together." Naruto asked as he looked at Citra. "You see, I have been thinking." Shiva said she had finished most of her pilgrimage, so she definitely knows her way on the roads more than anyone, and don't forget that she was able to do it on her own without a guardian. With her help, Yuna will be able to quickly finish her journey and face Sin. The sooner we take that thing down, the better, isn't it? "You're not forgetting about me, aren't you?" Orin asked, but Naruto ignored him to continue. "That, and Citra can also help Yuna become stronger. Her experiences and preparations will still be put to good use and won't be wasted." The blonde explained and then turned to Yuna. "But of course, I can't make this decision on my own. What do you say, Yuna? Will you allow Citra to travel with us?" The young summoner smiled brightly and nodded her head, making Naruto grin widely in response. "Yes, of course." Hey, Yuna, think about it. What if something goes wrong and— "I agree with Naruto. It's perfectly fine for her travel with us." Lulu interrupted Waka by speaking up while shaking her head. "Yes, it's not a problem at all." Orin nodded his head quietly in agreement, we won't be her guardian, but it'll be much safer for her to travel with us." The rest nodded their heads in agreement, not that they had anything against Naruto's idea. Waka scratched the back of his head and wisely kept his mouth shut, as he could also see Shiva's icy blue eyes looking straight at him as if she was daring him to speak another word. "It appears that the young man has decided it. What about you, Citra?" Shiva questioned her summoner as everyone turned to look at her. "The final choice is yours to make. Will you travel with them, with the one who can defeat sin, or continue your journey on your own like you have been doing all this time? I really can't say no in this matter, can I?" The pink-haired summoner asked, smiling as she placed a hand on curvy hip. "Very well, please lead the way. I will try to help as much as I can." "Yosh, off we go then," Naruto declared as he grabbed his backpack's shoulder strap and casually walked ahead of the party, before suddenly coming to a stop and then turning his head around to ask while chuckling nervously, "It's this way, right?" The party groaned and shook their heads in disappointment as Yuna laughed softly into her hand while Citra and Shiva were both looking at Naruto in amusement, both of them having different thoughts about the young man. It was after the party resumed their journey with their new companion that Shiva decided to take her leave and disappeared, but they all knew that they would be seeing her again very soon. Line break. Later that day, the group had fallen into a rhythm and the long road passed by steadily. There were little conversations, mostly between Citra and Yuna as they talked about their training to become summoners as well as their Ians, and with the heat of the day, the party found it harder and harder for them to travel under the hot sunlight. "Man, where is Shiva when you need her?" Naruto asked while wiping the sweat on his forehead. He then turned to look at Citra, who was trying to cool her body with her hand while her chest was also glistering with a healthy scene of sweat. "Can you summon her or anything?" "I can try, but she may not answer. She comes and leaves when she wants, and she really hates high temperature, so she probably won't come." The pink-haired summoner answered with a shake of her head, causing Naruto to mutter something under his breath before turning around to continue walking with the party on the seemingly never-ending road. "So, you're really from another world, aren't you?" "Yeah, it's called Elemental Nations." Naruto answered as he removed his jacket and put it into his backpack, revealing the black shirt that he wore underneath. "Don't you know that about me already? When Lady Shiva told me about you, she didn't let me know much. I believed it was because she didn't know much herself." Citra answered, "She said I could save this world from sin by becoming your summoner and always reassured me that you were capable of defeating that monster on your own, but not permanently for some unknown reasons." She said before asking as the others became quiet to listen, "So, can you really defeat sin?" "I don't know, actually. I will have to face sin to know if I can really defeat it." Naruto answered truthfully, "But honestly, it can't be any worse than the Jubi, the monster that I found with my friends back home to save my world." He then turned around and walked backwardly while trying to explain, moving his hands around in a dramatic manner. "You see, the Jubi is this ancient, 10-tailed beast that was the size of mountains. They said it was a god that created countries, with the power to swallow the oceans, split the land, and carry mountains on its back." The party all widened their eyes in shock as Naruto continued, "Its power was immeasurable, trust me, I know because I felt that myself. It was like being swallowed and overwhelmed in an ocean of powers, so great that I had this choking feeling and became extremely nervous as I faced it with my teachers." "But you defeated it?" Citra asked in curiosity. "Was that why Shiva said the people of your world had started calling you their hero?" "Not alone, I had help from my friend." The blonde then noticed a ruined structure not too far away from them that cast a massive shadow on the ground and decided to ask, "Hey, why don't we set our camp here for the time being? The sun is killing me right now." "Yes." Yuna nodded her head in agreement and the party moved to stand in the shadow, sighing in satisfaction as their bodies began to cool off. "Man, what a relief." Titus groaned as he fell to his butt and stretched his legs on the ground while Naruto prepared a camping mattress for the whole party. "I'm hungry, is it time for lunch yet?" "I believe it is." Waka nodded his head, "Do we have anything to eat? You should ask our storage here." Lulu gestured her hand toward Naruto, who sat down and opened his backpack to find the scrolls that he had used to store foods for everyone. "Wait a second," Naruto said and grinned as he pulled out a yellow scroll. "Here we go." He then unfolded it on the mattress and unsealed several rice balls as well as water bottles for everyone. What surprised them the most, however, was that the foods were still Hot and looked just like when Naruto bought them from a cafe they wrecked at Luca. Grab as much as you want, I will have this for myself. The blonde grinned like a maniac as he held up a cup of instant ramen, which had been prepared along with many more cups by Tsunade. What's that? Waka asked in curiosity as Naruto tore open the cover on the cup and then opened a water bottle. My favorite. Lulu, can you help me heat this up with one of your fancy black magic? Naruto asked while grinning playfully, making Lulu stare at him blankly for a second before using her magic to heat up the water inside the bottle to the boiling point. Thank you so much. The blonde grinned as he poured the water into the cup and closed it with a cover. Now I wait 3 minutes. That's from your world? Titus asked and tried to take a peek inside the cup as Naruto nodded his head in response. Do you really have to wait 3 minutes for it to be edible? Yeah, and it's called ramen. I actually can eat this raw, but it's more delicious when cooked with water. Naruto said as he unsealed a pair of chopsticks from another scroll. This is my favorite dish, I grew up eating this. Doesn't smell really healthy. Opening the wrapper around her rice ball, Citra took a small bite and then made a comment when Naruto opened the cover on the cup and grinned as he put his chopsticks inside and turned the noodles around. It's not, but hey, I am not complaining. The blonde grinned and started eating, slurping the noodle noisily into his mouth and starting to chew with a happy smile. Man, there's nothing better than a taste from home. He then looked at Yuna, who was quietly eating her rice ball, and decided to ask her after remembering something that she had told him when they first met. Hey Yuna, want to try some? You told me you wanted to see my home, didn't you? How about trying something from it first? Yuna was a bit taken aback by that, but she nodded her head nonetheless, making Naruto grin while twirling a few strands of noodle around his chopsticks. Thank you, Naruto. Yuna accepted the chopstick and placed the noodles into her mouth, putting her other hand near her lips as she chewed gently and slowly to savor the flavor. So, how is it? Naruto asked eagerly. It's very good, a bit salty for my taste, but I like it. Yuna answered with a smile. Can I try? Not gonna happen, buddy. Naruto answered immediately as he grabbed his cup and chopsticks and turned away before Titus could even finish his question. He then quickly finished his cup of noodles and drank the water in one gulp, sighing in satisfaction as he put it into a bag to throw away later when he found a trash bin. The party continued to enjoy lunch until Naruto suddenly heard a familiar sound. Turning his head, Naruto saw 3 large chocobo making their way toward them, wearing custom armor plates on their body, with a rider mounting them on their back. As the chocobo stopped in front of the group, the lead rider, Naruto assumed, a woman that dressed in a scant outfit of colored leather, addressed Yuna as she looked at her. Lady Summoner Yuna, I presume? She asked with a strong voice, very fitting for someone who was in charge. Yes, I am Yuna, the young summoner replied as she stood up and lowered her head, bowing to the female rider. My name is Lucille, captain of the Jose Chocobo Knights. The woman introduced herself and raised her hand in a similar fashion to the Crusaders, but with her hand extended. The second rider, also a woman, copied the gesture before saying, I'm Elma. We've been charged to guard the highroad. She explained. Elma looked a bit younger than her captain and her voice made her sound a bit young and naive. There have been reports of a large fiend appearing in this area, with a taste for chocobo, Lucille told them, so do take care, Summoner Yuna and her companion, if you are to rent any chocobo. Thank you. We will be careful, Yuna replied with a small smile. Good. We should get back to our rounds. Farewell. The captain nodded her head and continued shortly, before spurring her mount onward. Elma hesitated before following her captain. Our prayers are with you, Lady Summoner. She said, beckoning to the third rider and followed after her captain. Titus watched them go with a thoughtful look before declaring, a large fiend, let go get him. Orin looked at him, asking thoughtfully, why? Titus frowned before saying, because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Orin repeated. He laughed softly. Titus narrowed his eyes, what did I say now? Jecht said that a lot too, Orin told him, and every time he said it, it meant trouble for Braska and me. They don't seem to recognize you, do they? Naruto asked, looking at Citra who had finished her rice ball and was drinking water from a bottle. They won't. There are many summoners in this world, and the only reason they can recognize Yuna that easily is because she's the daughter of High Summoner Braska. Citra answered with a shake of her head, as much as I try to deny it, most of us do it for fame and reputation. Summoners are respected not only for their journey, but also because of their powers to call powerful beings, which sometimes get to them, and make them forget the real reason they start practicing summoning arts. What about you? Naruto asked, if you don't mind me asking, then why did you choose to become a summoner? The pink-haired woman took a deep breath before answering heavily, my parents and sister were killed by Sin 17 years ago. He came to our village in the middle of the night so we couldn't do anything. I was the only survivor. I'm sorry to hear that, Naruto said as he lowered his head apologetically. Don't worry about it. Citra shook her head before smiling. At least, now I am a part of a group that can take that monster down. Naruto nodded and looked at the water bottle in his hand. Pain, suffering, lost, Sin had done so many horrible things and taken so much from the people of Spira. Citra, Lulu, Yuna, Titus and Waka, all of them were its victims, and who knew how many people out there were suffering because of that creature or living their lives in fear that one day it would come to them and take their loved ones away from them. Shiva told him Sin would return, but Naruto knew that if he did everything that he could to take it down, then even for a short while, the people of Spira could live in peace knowing that the creature was gone for the time being. Still, he had been wondering ever since Shiva told him he would need a summoner to bring the eternal calm. He could take down Sin, but only a summoner could make it permanent. What was so special about a summoner, Naruto had to wonder, because while Citra was very powerful, Shiva didn't seem to have any problem with Yuna being his summoner. It was the reason why Naruto believed a specific summoner wasn't required for that matter. Anyone should be fine, Citra said that herself. He would have to ask the Eon more about that matter the next time he met her. Thank you for listening. I do hope you guys enjoy. If you guys enjoyed this, what if you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notifications, and also check out the other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.